then obviously the results will follow. So look, coming back to GDP, what I'm going to do, and it'll become very obvious why I'm doing this. When was the last one? Was it, so it's January, so it'll be the advanced for Q4, right? And don't forget, obviously you might be watching this, it's now Jan 2022, I say this all the time, you might be watching this in 23, 24, 25 and 26, and probably you can see I'm never doing this again because I'm never doing a 5-hour section on FOMC again. So obviously you might be watching this in 3 years time and it's still going to be very relevant for you. My point is, don't get thrown off by the fact I got 2022 there. I believe the last time we covered GDP, the advanced number may not have been released when I actually put the section together, because advanced GDP, if you remember, it comes out 4 weeks after the quarter ends. And I believe, and I could be mistaken, because like I said, I took a week off and I've forgotten when I did the GDP section. It might have been at the start of January. This GDP number, I don't think it was available, was it? I believe when we did the GDP section, we covered this 2%. I could be mistaken, but I believe we covered this 2%. So actually it's good. Gives us a chance to look at another number. And I'll show you, it all works the same. So what we do, we'll go to the Bureau of Economic Analysis. Okay, so we're going to do a summary of GDP. Okay, how GDP comes together, not how it works. You should know that by now. With the circular flow of income. If you don't know, go back, watch the GDP section. I'm going to assume you're masters at that now. Consumption, expenditures, C, business investment, government spending, exports minus imports, that forms output, total output. What we're going to do is I'm just going to show you how it's put together and why retail sales features, or how retail sales features in it. And then I think it will also serve as a nice summary because I gave you a lot of information in that initial GDP section. So what I want you to do, if you remember the resources, wasn't it? Let's have a look at, firstly, in fact, let's look at data by topic. GDP, I'm doing this on the fly a little bit because like I said, I don't feel a lot of this. I don't really agree with a lot of people structuring all of this perfectly because that's not how it should be. A lot of this, people should know this well enough that they don't need to structure it, but also you'll end up missing things out. You can see a lot of stuff will come to mind, more so if I do it in a free flow format. And then also the nature of the websites, I'm sure you understand, they're very dynamic and all over the place. It's very very difficult for me to use slides and things. So we're going to go through the websites together and you're going to get the most out of it that way. So tables only, click on that. Let's open this up. Okay, hopefully I'm not covering this. Okay, that's great. Sorry, and I know this might be a little bit small, but forgive me, but okay, I just widened it a little bit, but it's very uncomfortable for me to see it when it's so big, but fine, whatever. Let me see if I can. So hopefully you remember this. Let me zoom it a little bit. All right, I'll do that for you guys. Can you see that? 6.9%. We just saw it. Let me move this out of the way. So we're done with that. Do you remember we saw it there? 6.9%. Okay, obviously yours will be different. Just make sure you're comfortable with whatever yours is. I'm in Q4 21 and that's the number. Obviously, again, yours might be completely different, but the principle is identical. You can see it there, right? 6.9%, 3.3% personal consumption expenditures. And don't forget, these tables are slightly different, all of them. Table 2. Table 1 is the actual absolute percentage change. Okay, so C, don't forget this is C. Okay. Again, I won't go in detail because you already know this. C, that's government, consumption expenditures and gross investment. And then that's net exports. Okay, and that is business investment, isn't it? Okay, so C plus I plus G plus net exports. Just make sure I haven't left anything out at the bottom. I haven't. So basically what this is telling us is, consumption expenditures went up, let's make sure I'm not blocking anything, no. Went up 3% in the last quarter. Business investment went up 30% in the last quarter, massive jump in domestic investment, right? Gross how do you say that? Obviously that went up about 30%, but you see it's not that GDP went up 30% plus the 3%. These are just how much did each one of these categories go up in and of itself, right? Obviously a lot. The next table is more interesting for me. What's the contribution? So we already know that business investment was a lot. You see 5%. What that is saying is of the 6.9% increase in GDP, business investment was responsible for 5% of that. Okay, so we can see that there, and then we can see the breakdown as well over here. All right, so how that's all broken down, etc., etc. Okay, a lot of it was inventories. Okay, so obviously inventories, and they were able to obviously gather a lot of inventories, and I spoke to you about inventories in the GDP section. So if that doesn't make sense, why that would be a positive, go back and check in the GDP section. But they were able to accumulate inventories, and that was obviously positive. Because don't forget, inventories that are accumulated is output. They had to be produced. So that's positive for the economy because it was produced. Okay, so a lot of inventories they were able to accumulate. So that was obviously very, very positive. So it's quite interesting to see that actually. You can see the breakdown. But again, I talked to you about this in a lot of detail before. Is that a bit small? It might be a bit small. Let me just see. Is that better? Yeah, so of the 6.9%, 5 is just too big for me. But if you don't mind, I'm just going to small that a little bit. 5% was down to business investment. So the I part of C plus I plus G. Consumption was 2%, which is made up of goods and mainly services. A lot of it services and so on and so forth. We've covered this 1,000 times in the GDP section. That's why I say make sure you go and cover all this stuff. That's not why I want to do this summary. Okay, the summary is I want to show you how they get that number. Okay, and then you've got the absolute numbers here. Okay, which we've covered this in so much detail. I'm not going to bother, obviously, so you can see it's basically going to add up to all the same changes as before, but obviously that's not the point. Basically, point is that I want to show you how all this data is put together. So how each of these is put together. The C, the consumption expenditures. Where do they get these numbers from? Basically, you can see the breakdowns here. Goods, durable goods. The numbers are there basically. So let's just go through them. I don't know, motor vehicle parts. This is how much was produced in the last quarter, right? 348 billion of non-durable goods. Clothing and footwear, 501 billion. Consumption expenditures, 437 in gasoline. And where do they get these numbers from? How do they get all these numbers? And obviously I talked to you about this a lot last time, but let's do a summary of that. Okay, because it is incredibly complex. It's not, it is complex, it is very complex, but the problem is not only complex, it's so, just vast is the word I'm looking for. I think I mentioned it before. There's hundreds and hundreds upon hundreds of data pieces they're using to put all this together. It is a vast, I think was it like 2,000 employees they've got. The BEA, I can't remember, so many departments, so many different people working there. So that is the point, right? How do they get all these data? Can you see how the data is broken down? Motor vehicles, furnishings, food and beverages, and actually you can go into, I think one of the tables has a lot of detail, non-durable goods, and you can mess around with these tables and you can see they all go into different types of details and stuff. I think this is the main one here, where they break it down into all of these items. I've never really looked in incremental detail, breaking motor vehicles and parts down further, and it's not going to help me as a trader. What is going to help me though is understanding on a broad basis, at least at this level, goods, services, and then within services, a little bit like the CPI. Remember, we just don't need all those little tiny minuscule levels, but you seem to have a broad understanding of how it's put together. GDP even more so. Why? Circular flow of income. right, need to understand. This is C. Must be sick of me saying this, but it is true. Net exports, and then obviously got the government expenditures below. Where does this data come from? You know, how do they know? C, in the circular flow of income. I'm not going to draw it, but just very slowly, you know, with firms and households and all of that, and that bit, the consumption and business investment. And how do they know all this? Where do they get all this data from? We spoke about this in the GDP section, but I'm going to summarize it hopefully quite nicely for you, because it was so immense when we did the GDP section. So like I said, it's going to be a little bit free flow, but it's going to be good. It's going to be good. So what I would suggest, what you can do, right, the first thing to do is we go to the tables, I believe. Where are the tables gone? So remember this, data by topic, right? We're going to come back to this. GDP. Obviously the website might be slightly different if you're watching this in a couple years, right? Slight differences, but just find this section. Can you see this? Key source data and assumptions. That is a fantastic starting point. Okay, so as part of the summary, let's start there. Okay, let's go into this. Found this a great starting point. Should be the starting point for your investigations. Okay, can you see here? So it's broken down quite nicely here. Can you see the source here? Okay, so I'll zoom in a little bit. Can you see it's got the source? We covered this already in the GDP section, but obviously I'm going to do a nice little summary here. Just make sure I'm not covering that. Nope. Okay, so let me hide. I'm going to hide some of this. Okay, because we're only looking at Q4. Let me hide that. There you go. Can you see the number? 23992.4. Okay. It's going to match the, I believe, Unchained. There you go. 23992.4. Okay, so this is the table. Remember with the actual GDP numbers, 6.9 and etc. etc. That 23992. Okay, and even though they report the chained amount, right? And remember, the chained takes into account actual changes in prices over a period. We talked a little bit about that, I think, during the CPI. Don't worry too much. You don't need to know how it's calculated and all of that. It's not going to help you. Just know roughly what it is. It obviously takes into account changing prices during periods. So they're using the unchained amount, but it doesn't matter. All we care about is where does the number come from. 23992. Are we looking at the same number? Yes, we are. 23992. You know, C, goods and services, plus I, plus, you know, gross private, so I, and do you see what I mean? It's all the same stuff. C plus I plus G. Where does it come from? Can you see the source? The national accounts, I talked about a lot of this, right? Ward's intelligence, Jada. Remember these, because we're going to cover these now in the summary. Can you see for all of them? You know, what was the output in terms of new autos, foreign autos, in terms of goods and the goods breakdown, right? Other goods and motor vehicle fuels, and do you see? It's telling you where it's getting the data from. And we're going to have a look at this in a little bit more detail. We're going to do a summary. Services. Can you see? National accounts. Actually, that's from the Bureau of Labour Statistics, which isn't surprising. CPI, obviously, we know. BLS does the CPI. Census Bureau. National accounts. Census Bureau, and so on and so forth, okay? So you can keep going down, 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 okay? And you can have a look at all of these. But to be honest, I don't think this is the most useful place to look for the source. This just gives you a broad overview and gets you nicely started. Okay, where I would suggest after this you go. So can you see we've got a rough idea? We know they're coming national accounts and also from some other surveys and sources. Can you see this is a minefield? I'm going to be glad when this is all over. That's what I said, because it is a minefield, right? And get back to trading. But don't forget my speech at the start. I don't want you to do that. I want you to put in the time I've put in as well, so I'm able to actually tell you this, all right? Don't just jump ahead. Obviously, I'm not saying, you know, just look at it and then stop. I'm just saying, for me personally, because I've been looking at that for so many years, I'm just glad to not have to do it constantly. Do it once, that's my point. Understand it. Once you've read all these manuals I'm talking about, I believe I mentioned to you the handbook. At least read the personal consumption expenditures. Okay, read this. Okay, 71 pages. Can't remember if I said read it or not, but do read it. Okay, read this. Don't worry too much about investment and government consumption, and don't worry too much about those, because consumption is basically it's like 70%. I think might be slightly more, 70% of GDP. It will give you a very good idea of how the data is collected. Okay, you don't need to read the whole government expenditures section, the export section, which is here, or the business investment and changing private inventories, and you don't need to read all of that, because it's not going to add much more than what you read in the PCE section. Once you've read just make sure I'm not covering that. PCE section is going to give you enough of a flavor of how GDP is collated. You're going to come to the conclusion, all right, I realize there's so much going on, it's vast, but I got a good idea now of roughly. They're getting it from various different sources and surveys, the Census Bureau, I think it's the EC. You'll see this a lot. Economic census, I think it is. This huge, they do once every, I think it might even be every few years they do it, right? The big surveys, they're doing all of this. Then they extrapolate and they put them all together, and where it's not available, they bolt them to each other. And we're going to talk about a little bit about that, don't worry. But you will realize this. You won't just need to take my word for it. I want you to read about it. I think it's very, very important. If you're going to get into economics and fundamentals, you need to understand it. So best place to do that is here, personal consumption expenditures. Okay. Once you understand that, you'll have a very good idea of how it all fits in together. I did ask you to read it, I believe. PCE measures the goods and services purchased by person. So it's the C. It's the C of the C plus I plus G. I'm not saying business investment isn't important. That's not why I'm saying don't bother reading it, as in all of these. I'm just saying once you've read one of them, you'll have a very good idea how all the others kind of work. So that's PCE. So I want you to read this. We're going to do a rough summary together. Okay, so I'm going to tell you exactly how it's put together. So remember step number 1, right? And I'm not going to bother, we could, but I'm not going to bother writing it down. In fact, I'll do it, whatever. That's what I want it to be proper, right? So step 1 was what? Download the tables. Okay. Just get familiar with the layout of GDP. It's C, and then it's like durable goods, and then you've got non-durable, and then you've got services, and then you've got business investment broken down into, I think, investment and inventories, and you see the point, so on and so forth. And just remember it's C plus I plus G. I think net exports comes first, doesn't it? And then you've got government expenditures. Download the tables, just get familiar with them. Yep, okay, I get it. Envy's right. It's the circular flow of income. That's what we're all here to basically aim towards, a good economic growth. As in, that's why societies are built. We talked about it. I don't want to get too philosophical, but it is what it is. Just accept it. That's what everyone aims for. So that's what I take as a trader. So that was step 1. Step 2 was look at the source tables, which we just did together. Do you remember we downloaded the source data, which was here. Where was it gone? So tools. Data by topic. In fact, it was on that table, I think it was just on that page we were on. And then here, key source data and assumptions. Okay, so have a look at that. Just get familiar with that. Oh, I see it's coming from the national account. Some of it's coming from the BLS. Some of it's coming from the Census Bureau. Some of it's coming from, all the different surveys. Just get familiar with them. Some of them you will have seen already. Things like, Census Bureau. They do the retail sales anyway. I believe they do. I'm going to look a bit silly if they don't, but it's impossible to remember this at all times. But I believe they do the retail sales. Yeah, there you go. Census Bureau. Okay, so Census Bureau do the retail sales anyway. So become familiar. They're using all of these different sources. Some of it, obviously, they get from the national accounts and so on and so forth. So what you then need to do, step 3. You see, it's like peeling an onion. You're starting with the outer layer, the whole GDP table. You're then taking it one step deeper. Okay, let me peel a layer and see where each individual line takes the source from. Then you're peeling another layer, okay? And you're actually going to go deeper into some of those sources. So the one that you're actually going to look at is the national accounts. Okay, so you can have a look at that. Let's have a look. Okay, so that was in here. Sorry, I lost my so many things going on, isn't it? Then you're going to come in here and you're going to be like, okay, you know what, I'm going to have a look at the national accounts for personal consumption expenditures, because I don't need to read all of them, hundreds of pages. Let's just focus on that because it's the biggest part of GDP, and that will give me a real good flavor of where all the individual lines are coming from. Okay, so PCE, we'll go through this just very quickly because it's a summary, right? This is what hopefully you have learned from looking at GDP. Measures goods and services purchased by persons. Basically, it's consumption expenditures. Okay, a million times we've covered this. What is that saying? That is C of C plus I plus G, blah, 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 blah. You know, my favorite, but it's not mine, it's everyone's favorite. Clearly, you can see every institution trader is looking at that. You can read all of this stuff in your own time. Don't really need to go through that together. Content of PCE, etc., etc. Okay, by function, you see this? PCE by function is classified into the following broad categories. Where do we see that? We've seen that in the tables. Okay, let me see if I've still got the tables over here. Yeah, we do. Do you remember the GDP tables? Okay, look. Durable goods, non-durable goods, motor vehicles and parts. I'm not covering that, am I? Nope. Okay, so we've got all of that. Can you see? It's these. Food and beverages, clothing, footwear, health, right? What have we got here? Hopefully that's what, yeah, look, clothing, footwear, okay? Healthcare, you see, that's what they're talking about. They split these PCEs. Can you see personal consumption expenditures? C, they've broken it down into all these little categories, okay? That's what it's talking about here. Transportation, financial services, other goods, and blah, blah, blah. So they're using all of those in personal consumption expenditures of GDP. Broad categories, etc., etc. So read all of that. You know, it's very, very interesting. I think it's important. Okay, and all of these tables and etc., etc. All of this is a little bit irrelevant for us. As described earlier, the NEPA estimates include those for P are prepared using a wide variety of source data. Okay, so you can have a look at that. Principal source data, just click on that. Source data for quarterly estimates, annual updates, comprehensive updates. Okay, you can have a look through all of this. Okay, and they've got, so here's the thing. I don't know whether to cover this with you right now. Okay, we're going to do this right now. So I'm going to skip. Okay, so this is step 3. Okay, what you could do, look, it is what it is. All right, it's not don't blame the messenger. This is how they set it out. It is a complicated, vast area. Okay, at least you've got me explaining this stuff to you. What I want you to do next, actually, if I just go into, if you go to this page, let me just add that on here. So methodologies. There is something I want you to read in detail, which we're going to cover together. Which one is it? Is it revisions and source data? Let's have a look. Download this PDF. Yes, this. So I want you to read this article. This is kind of the final article, maybe the last one as part of the summary. Okay, so basically what you need to, you should kind of have understood this already. So the way GDP works, okay, is it's not just one release. Okay, so you are used to, this is so important. Okay, really, really understand this. Very, very important. Okay, the GDP number, let me actually go to it. It's nice to have it up, isn't it? Where is it gone? Sorry, it's not there, is it? It's in the 4th week. There we go. Advanced GDP. This GDP number, okay, that you see reported, that everyone goes crazy, not particularly crazy over, but relative to all the future GDP releases, as in the 2nd cut, the 3rd cut, the one that everyone looks at, and it's got the red as in high impact, is advanced GDP. Okay, it's not the only GDP release. Now you kind of should know this already, right? You might be thinking, Envy, you've told me this. I got the preliminary and the final, and it's on my dashboard, right? It's on the dashboard here. Advanced. Then I've got the other ones here, the preliminary and final. I understand that. See, what you need to understand is that is not the just to complicate matters further, that is not the only release of GDP. Okay, so you do have, see what it is, you've got quarterly, and then within quarterly you've got advanced, preliminary, and final. Okay, you then have other releases. Okay, so you have annual, I believe. That's what I do need you to read that, because it is explained all in there. Then the annual one is revised every year for 3 years, I think. So annual 1, annual 2, annual 3. And I'll tell you why I'm explaining this to you. It's quite important. And then you've got, I believe there's a one every 5 years. Okay, there's a 5th year revision. Don't get confused. This is not year 1, year 2. Okay, this is all relating to this year. So let's just make it up. Let's say this is 2021. Okay, I'm making this up. So in 2021, would you agree there'll be 4 quarterly releases 3 times? So Q1, okay, then there'll be Q2, Q3, Q4. Are we all agreed? All right, that's 2021. There will then be an annual GDP for this same period. Okay, that's what you have to understand. It's for this period, right? It's at the end of the year. Then the same data is revised again as more data becomes available. You see this? I'm not talking about 2022, 23, 20. I'm talking about for 2021. There'll be a second release, then a third release 3 years later, and then another release 5 years later for 2021. And the reason I'm mentioning this, it can be quite overwhelming. Imagine how it is for me to explain this. And that's why I do go a little bit slowly. And that's why I mentioned what I mentioned at the start. Okay, maybe you're understanding now why I gave such a long lecture at the start, which probably did everyone's head in. But I'm doing it because I want you to understand this, and you're not going to get it if you just watch a video. You have to go and read this stuff so you can really get a deep understanding of this. The methodology for every single one of these is different. Okay, the methodology for that is different to that, 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 is different to that. The further along the chain you get, the better and more accurate the number is. Why? Because 5 years later, you're going to have much more accurate data of what people consumed, of what businesses invested, of. Do you see? Because you're going to have more time to do broader surveys and ask more people, and it's natural. So as you get further, it'll be more comprehensive. The problem is the market. By the time you get to even the annual release of 2021, which will cover this quarter, the market's already interested in 2022. Do you see? By that time, the quarterly release for 2022 will have come out. Do you see what I mean? It doesn't pay any attention to these. It's like, it's old news. And you're going to see this because I'm going to show you that there are differences in, obviously here, different surveys will be used because you'll have more comprehensive surveys, data. What are we interested in? This one. Okay. So again, to repeat, okay, this quarterly GDP data that you see here, advanced GDP, that all of you will have on yours, there will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there might even be 6. I don't know, but I think about 5. This same number, and in fact more, isn't it? Let me start again. 1, advanced. 2, preliminary. 3, final. 4, annual, which will include that quarter. 5, annual 2, which will be a revision, as in what they'll do, they'll go back to 2021 2 years later and they'll make sure the data was right. 6, they'll do it again, third time, and then 7. There will be 7 releases of this same data. As in, they'll go and revise it, okay? It's not different data, it's the same data, but they're just cleaning it. as more data comes through. Okay. Now, and we'll talk about the different types of data that they're using, as in why it's getting more and more comprehensive. It's obvious. It's because of time. More time has passed. You've had more chance to ask more people things in surveys, and data becomes more comprehensive. You know, end of the day, they need it. There's no point There's no point them just saying, no, we're not going to give you the data for 5 years because it's only accurate in 5 years' time. How is a government going to respond? How is the FOMC going to respond to a recessionary cycle if it doesn't know until 5 years later? That's why they accept whatever they can get their hands on early on. The advanced. Do you see why the market is like, nah, it's fine, the advanced? And I talked about this before during the GDP section, that this is very, very accurate anyway. It doesn't tend to be miles apart. This can, and there's a lot of debate in the economic community about, hey, these numbers tend to be revised, and then, look, I'm just doing my job as a trader. The rest of the market is reacting to that and believes in this first number and these first 2, 3, whatever. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, don't shoot the messenger. I keep saying it. Okay, if you want to do an economics degree and get into economics and, you know, understand how these things are put together and are they using the best methodologies and all of that, you know, save that for another time, because that ain't nothing to do with trading. That's economics, and it's a beautiful thing to understand that. I'm just saying, it's not, I'm here to teach you how to trade. I'm not here to teach you to be an economist. Okay, if you want to be an economist, fantastic. Then you can learn about all this stuff and it's fascinating. We're here to understand, what do institutional traders care about and what they're reacting to? Well, it's this. Because part of the problem is, by the time this annual survey is done, do you see we're already getting advanced data for Q1 2022. Do you see, by the time this is done, I'm thinking about Q1 2023. I'm like 2 years ahead. So, okay. Why is this important? Because my focus as a trader is on this. Quarterly advanced estimate, the first estimate of GDP available out of this timeline over 5 years. Okay, and that's what I want you to read about. It is so important, because what you will find, you see this principal source data where we just left off and I jumped ahead. You see this comprehensive data, adjusted comprehensive data, direct indicator data, indirect trend-based data, all of that. The first release will be using quite a lot of this indicator data, indirect trends, and what they'll be doing is they won't have complete data, is my point, like comprehensive data. As time goes on, they'll have more and more comprehensive data. Okay, and that's what the third step. I want you to really understand that as part of our summary. So you read this. What I just summarized there, you will see this here. Look, the revision cycle. BEA produces quarterly and annual estimates of GDP. Do you remember I just drew that out? Right, so hopefully it's still there. Do you see? Quarterly and annual estimates of the same number. That's what they're saying, okay? Of GDP in series of vintages. Do you see? Current quarterly estimates, annual revision estimates, and comprehensive revision estimates. The BEA revises its estimates in successive vintages to improve the accuracy. Okay, so we just talked about that. By incorporating complete data, etc., etc. Okay, revisions are not errors. Revisions are mainly driven by incorporation of more complete data. I talked about that. I said, obviously, you've got time to do better surveys, ask more people, and it's more complete. That's all it is. Doesn't mean that the advanced GDP is out. We saw that. There's very different little differences. They'll just be making minor revisions. Here you go. This in table format is what I just said. Okay, so can you see here? It says current quarterly estimates provide an early read. So what is that? That's that first one. This one. Advanced GDP quarter on quarter. That is the quarterly estimate. Do you see here? Advanced estimate. Check this table out, okay? Second estimate is what? The preliminary. Third estimate is the final. Then there'll be some revisions to those. So I even forgot to put that on the... There's even more. Do you see? We've got advanced. That is this. Advanced. That's the second. That's the third. Then they'll revise these. Then they've got annual. Do you see that? First annual revision. Do you remember I said there's an annual? Second annual. Third annual. And then a comprehensive, I think, 5 years later. So what they're saying here in this table, if you understand, what they're saying for 2009, They had like 1, 2, 3, I don't know, not applicable, 4, 5, 6, 7 releases. How many have I got here? 7. See that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, over 5-year period. They gave you the same number 7 times, okay? Because obviously, and I shouldn't even laugh, it's great, they're doing this amazing job, but they're just constantly revising it to make sure that it's accurate. I'll tell you why this is so important in a second. So, current quarterly estimates of GDP are published in a series of releases. Advanced, preliminary, and final, we know. Advanced, they call it second and third. 30, 60, 90 days. We already know that. I've been through it a million times. Obviously, if you don't remember, go back. Annual revision estimates. Do you see? Released at 3 annual. So after 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. Okay, so we talked about that here in this terrible drawing I did. Look, after 1 year, after 2 year, after 3 year. The same data, the same period. Comprehensive are conducted every 5 years. Releasing economic censuses. Okay, so this is the big, if you live, I think in the UK they do a national census every few years, don't they? So this is what they do in the US, an economic census, and I think everyone has to fill it in, and then they get the most accurate data. I think that's what they're doing. Again, you can read up on that. Just Google economic census USA and you read all about it. Comprehensive data, etc., etc. Adjusted comprehensive data, blah, 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 blah. What it is, the reason I'm telling you all of this, why am I saying all of this? Envy you, I don't need to know all of this. What are you talking about? GDP, this is an economics lesson. This is why. Because, firstly, every estimate, they use different source data. Because if more is available, obviously I'm going to use the best data. What you need to understand, okay, is the one that we are interested in, and I've said this many, many times, is this one, the advanced GDP. It's important you understand this because then that's the data you're going to have the most interest in, right? You know when you saw the table, so go back to that table here, overview of source data here, where is it? And in fact, I'll show you, it's here. What I mean by the table is, I mean this one. Oh God, where's it gone? Give me a second, I do have it. This one, you see this key source data? Right, this source data will be different for, I think they call it vintages, don't they? For different vintages, so for different releases. Okay, so, and don't worry, okay, it's very clear. I'm going to show you that in pie chart format. That's why I say read this document, it's great. Look, the advanced data, okay? What they are doing, can you see the comprehensive data, like complete data, is very small. Only 25% of this release, advanced GDP here, is using comprehensive data. Can you see? A lot of it is using trend-based data and indirect indicator data, and what it is, right, and I'll explain to you what that stuff is. It's kind of like they're using extrapolation and judgment and best guesses, and do you see, because it's not available. Look at the second one. You remember you get the preliminary. Look how much comprehensive data. Can you see they got 36%? You see they got 10% more full data. Look at the third one, even more, okay? That's how much, that's what this pie chart means. So can you see the different percentages of, and then obviously as they go ahead, annual revision, look at that, comprehensive is 73%, and then 2 years later 84%, 3 years later 87%, and 5 years later it's almost 100% comprehensive. Do you see? 96%. Compare that to the first release, 25.5. So my point is, right, and I've never seen this explained. Can you see how poorly this is understood? And hopefully you find the value in what I'm doing. Hopefully you appreciate me doing this, going into all this detail, and don't find it like Envy just going off on a tangent. I'm not. This is so important. People just do not understand this. The comprehensive data in the advanced release is so small. Can you now understand why the market pays so much attention to this survey data and payrolls and this kind of survey type data or indicator type data? Can you see why the market pays so much attention to this? Because they don't have comprehensive data. It doesn't exist. Do you see? They have to take things like payrolls, surveys like the ISM done by third parties, and in particular some of the new orders and customer orders. And do you see? They almost have to kind of guesstimate, because that is what the BEA is doing. All right, that's the point of me going into all of this. Their comprehensive data is very, very small. Okay, so the market is also trying to use estimates of what is likely to be the full picture. Now, the BEA does go into incredible detail in the sense that what we unfortunately don't have, we do have access, but we just don't have the time to do it. I mean, you want to be figuring out 300, 400, 500 pieces of data and doing complex calculations to kind of, figure out the true picture. No, that's why we just read it in one number and use kind of the survey data to guesstimate, because that is what they're doing. They go into incredible detail because obviously GDP is vast, right? You've got so many different types of consumption expenditures. You've got all these different types of business investments, and you want to cover the entire economy. You cannot do that without going obviously into a lot of detail. So the market kind of has its best stab at it, which is here. ISMs, the payrolls, and obviously retail sales, which I'm going to show you in a second. And that gives a very good picture of kind of what the broad overall number may come out at. But obviously the GDP has much more importance for other organizations, so they go into much more detail, the BEA, to get to the number. But the point is, I really want you to understand that different releases have less kind of guesstimates and extrapolations and more comprehensive data basically as you go forward. But because we don't have time as traders, by the time these releases down here are coming out, we're already on to the next quarter. Do you see why we don't have time to wait for these? So my point is, which one are we interested in? This one, quarterly GDP. And you're going to see why I'm telling you this over and over again. You'll see it in a moment. Okay. So the source data, okay, you're going to see it here. If you go back to this, do you remember this? Personal consumption expenditures. I said to you, check out this PDF. As you scroll down, check this out. Can you see? So like I said, I want you to read this. These tables, I talked about them in the GDP section. This is just for summary purposes. Do you remember you've got all these motor vehicles, furnishing, and all those broad categories that we saw at the start? I'm surprised I even remember off this fast, isn't it? Where's the categories gone? Here. Remember these categories? Furnishings, household, and blah, blah, blah. This table will tell you where the source data is coming from, as in how they're estimating it. And the reason I gave you that whole thing about quarterly estimate and annual revisions and blah, blah, blah. Can you see here? It says here, so for example, for motor vehicles, benchmark here, but look, indicate a series used to interpolate and extrapolate. You see here? Quarterly estimates, yearly estimates, non-benchmark years. What it is basically we're interested in what? The quarterly estimates. That's why. Can you see it's different? It's different. It's different depending on, are you looking for the annual revision? Are you looking for the one done in 5 years' time? Are you looking for the one done quarterly? Which one are we interested in? Quarterly advanced estimate. That's this one. Quarterly estimates. Okay. So what you're interested in is this part going all the way down. Basically, this here. Comprehensive data, trend-based data, indicator data, direct indicator data. So what these things are, right? Comprehensive data, the best place to see a summary of that is here. Okay, we'll look through them together. What's comprehensive data? Comprehensive or nearly comprehensive coverage of the relative population. Consistent with concepts, coverage, or basically they're kind of, in the clues in the word. You're not going to get much revision out of them. They're pretty much the full picture. Okay, so they will have some of that, obviously some early surveys that are done comprehensively. There's adjusted, so you can read the, again, to be fair, you can read these in your own time. These data require substantial adjustments, so they will make adjustments. We're not here to do an economic or maths class, right? I'm not going to go through the adjustments, but you can imagine a lot of economics students will be looking at this, or economics departments, but as traders, I don't care, we don't care. Just good to know that basically that there is some comprehensive data going into that quarterly GDP release, this one. There's some that isn't. You're going to see how this relates to retail sales in a moment. So look, adjusted comprehensive data makes up how much? See it there? So I believe it actually is part of that. Okay, comprehensive data. Okay, the other one, let's have a look at the next one. Direct indicator data, and this is where it gets really interesting, okay? Direct indicator data are used to indicate the movements of a series closely related to comprehensive data that ultimately incorporate, but they are less detailed, right? So they're less detailed basically. So that is, where is it? Here, 12%. Okay. Indirect indicator data, volume or activity indicators, more suitable data are not available. Okay. So that is, and don't worry, you'll see that in that table. You see which one's which. That's this. So that's that. Okay. And trend-based data. Okay. No data is available. They're just used on basically previous estimates and regressions and judgment and whatnot. Okay. So that is quite a big part of it. Okay. So that was trend-based data, which is this one. Okay. So can you see all sorts of stuff going on? Way beyond the scope of being a trader, but understand it one time and then never again, but at least you know, okay, I understand that there's a whole, all you really need to get is that there's all different types of methodologies being used to come up with the advanced estimate, because the full piece of data isn't available. Okay, and if you really want to know why I'm not going into detail with this, let me show you. Okay, so you see things like direct indicator data, indirect indicator data, trend-based data, and so on and so forth, which is the bulk of this. Okay, just read this here, right? Generally, monthly or quarterly source data that are used to prepare quarterly estimates are not as comprehensive as the annual source data. We already said that. Thus, some estimates are prepared through extrapolation or interpolation, okay, using the more frequent but less comprehensive data, blah, 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 blah. For periods not yet covered by annual estimates, such as the current quarter, this, advanced GDP for the current quarter, the quarterly estimates are extrapolated from the latest annual estimate. Okay, so they'll take the last annual estimate. Do you remember I told you there's annual versions done of all these things? They'll take the last annual estimate based on comprehensive annual source data. So it'd be the previous annual estimate of the previous year. They'll then look for some pattern in any quarterly source data they can find, right? And this is where retail sales comes in quite handy for them, because they'll kind of the only real, at least for the goods part of personal consumption expenditures, they'll have retail. This is why I've done all of this with you, because this is where they're using retail sales. You know, and the reason I've had to explain this to you is because I cannot find this anywhere, this information. I have literally had to read that 77 pages, I'm not going to lie, in the past, to get an understanding of this. That's why I know this so well. I'm not just magically, Envy just woke up one day and knew it. I put in the time and effort. I read the 77 pages and it started to become clear to me, oh, they're using retail sales to make up these estimates. Okay, and that's why I'm telling you all of this. Because what they do, they use the annual source data, quarterly estimates are interpolated between annual estimates using other data, quarterly source data. They're given some examples here. They use a variety of specific indicators based on Census Bureau tabulations. Don't forget the Census Bureau does the retail sales. So look here, for example, annual tax return data used to prepare the estimates of corporate profits are only available for a given year, right? So they don't have the data for that quarter. beginning with the second annual revision estimates for that year. Therefore, prior to the second annual revision, changes in the annual and quarterly estimates are extrapolated using a variety of industry-specific indicators, etc., etc. Do you see why I'm not going into the actual calculations? Okay, we'll be here all week, right? But this is enough. There has to be a limit, which we don't want to cross, obviously, because then it no longer becomes about trading. It starts to go into economics and even deeper than economics. I just really want you to understand that what they are doing, they're using the data they have. So they might use a benchmark for the previous year. They've got real, like, solid annual data from the previous year. They will then use bits and bobs of data they can get from here and there, use a bit of judgment, use some retail sales data that isn't exactly matching the categories but is quite similar, and they'll use some obviously mathematical equations to try and extrapolate it just to make it kind of accurate. That is what is going on here, okay, in all of this. Why am I mentioning this to you? Because if I don't tell you this, when you go through this table here, you're going to be completely lost. Where it says your personal consumption expenditures, you see this table? Right, I told you to go down and check this table out, and it'll tell you where each of these categories, okay, is gonna. Can you see here? It says here, net purchases of used motor vehicles, right? For current quarterly estimates, which is this advanced GDP, the C bit for motor vehicles. Sorry, here, net purchase of used motor vehicles. How do they do it? And do you remember I said to you, that's why we needed to go through that kind of, you know, which bit are we interested in? Are we interested in the quarterly estimates, the annual revisions, quarterly estimates? This, what are they doing? Extrapolation based on retail sales of used vehicles from retail sales data, okay? Monthly retail sales data, okay? Let me show you that. And all the legends, you can find them at the bottom. Okay, so if you keep going down, where is it? Can you see that? Monthly retail trade survey. Okay, that is retail sales. All right, monthly retail trade survey. Do you remember we're here to do what? Retail sales. Okay, where's it gone? Where's that retail sales number? There you go. Okay, I will show you. Latest release. Okay, what does that say? Monthly retail trade report. Okay, MRT. Okay, that is what that is. This monthly retail trade. Okay, MRT. It's the retail sales number. All right, so that is what they're using. Okay, do you see? If I hadn't explained all of this stuff to you, you'd be looking at this table just like, what on earth are they talking about? Okay, that is what they're doing. They're using that extrapolation and tweaking here and, you know, doing some sort of adjustments here, and based on retail sales of used vehicle dealers from MRTS. Okay, and if you keep going down, you will see here that current quarterly estimate, same as for the most recent year. Okay, you see a lot of them are using retail sales, okay, as their kind of methodology to make an estimate. Okay, they're using retail sales. So you see that here. So can you see a lot of these current quarterly estimates are using the same method as for the most recent year. So it will say here, same as for the, let's go and have a look at some others. So we looked at net purchases of used motor vehicles. Let's have a look at a few others. Household appliances. You know, what was actually bought by consumers? Household appliances. Well, they use the same methodology as for the most recent year. Most recent years here. Retail control method, using retail sales from the monthly retail trade report. Okay, I'm not going to go into the retail control method. Okay, if you want, it is quite fascinating. The retail control method, you will be able to find it in the documents, and you can have a look at it. It's kind of a little bit off topic, but it's a way. What they'll do is they're benchmarking. So again, I won't go into details, and, you know, even they use this method, commodity flow method as well, and they've got various methods. You know, and I don't want to confuse anyone and start going off into topics, but I've had a look at this in quite a lot of detail, and you can in your own time. I can't remember, it's in one of the packages on the, where is it? This page here. here. It's in one of these. Okay, you can go and have a look, and I think it does actually show you some examples of the retail control method. But again, it's kind of, it's this one. There you go. Estimating methods. Okay, so you can go and have a look at that. Retail control methods. In fact, you know what? I'm talking to you for like 2 hours. I might as well just quickly point it to you. You see here, retail control method and commodity flow method. So you can have a look. Retail control method uses retail sales data compiled by the Census Bureau, right, to estimate annual, quarterly, and monthly consumer spending, etc., etc. Okay, and it will just tell you, look, a benchmark year. Do you remember I told you they'll use the benchmark year, and they'll do all sorts of adjustments because they'll be able to find similar. Look, can't remember where it's written. Some here. Look, by corresponding product lines that are based on retail sales by kind of business. And so what they'll do is they'll try and find similar categories in the retail sales survey, and they'll use that to estimate other categories, right? All right, so I think that's pretty much enough for our purposes. So that is kind of retail control method. God, I've lost the tables now. These methods, here we go. Okay, so they're using, point is, you see they're using all these little methods, but they're using retail sales as a benchmark. Okay, so can you see why the market loves to look at retail sales? Because if the BEA is using retail sales as a benchmark for doing all the extrapolations, doing all this trend-based data and so on and so forth, the retail sales is going to give the traders a very good idea, not of GDP, of the bits of GDP that the BEA are using retail sales to estimate. Make sense? Okay, so you can go down here and see how many of these categories are being used. MRTS is retail sales, and I do not want to confuse you even more, but it is okay, so we'll talk about this when we go to retail sales. Okay, just remember this: MRTS is retail sales, but it's not the retail sales that you see on your calendar. Okay, this is advanced retail sales. Okay, so it's slightly different. All right, so, and look, I want to tell you I want to tell you the detail basically. So I don't want to just, it'd be easy for me to say and no one would notice, because already I know I'm probably taking 99% of you on in places you're never gonna have gone unless I showed you, and I don't mean that arrogant way. It's a fact. So I could just tell you that is the retail sales and you'll all be like, yep, great. It's slightly different, okay? So it is the same data, but it's not advanced retail sales. So don't worry, it's very straightforward. Can you see it says advanced monthly retail trade report, and then here it says monthly retail trade report. They're slightly different, okay? FAQs, let me show you very quickly. It's very straightforward, to be honest. Let's have a look. It's basically about the surveys. It's slightly less people in the advance because they want to release it quickly. Do you see this? It's got MARTS and MRTS. So can you see here in the summary of the tables? Let's go back to it. Sorry, I know I keep losing it. The place. God, where's it gone? Here. I don't know why I keep losing that place. Can you see that? MRTS, retail sales. See that? It's that. MRTS. Do you see that? See, retail sales. Can you see this? MARTS is the one that you see here. This is advanced retail sales. Okay, so it is the same, but it's a little bit earlier. The reason is they survey less people, so they can get it out quickly. And I'm going to explain that when we get to the retail sales section. But I might as well talk about it here because I want you to be accurate. Can you see here? What do we talk about? Appliances, wasn't it? Household appliances. Look, same as for the most recent year. Retail control method using retail sales from the MRTS. See this? MRTS. Glassware. Tools and equipment. MRTS. Video, audio. MRTS. Benchmark as a benchmark. MRTS, 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 MRTS. Music. See, they're using retail sales as a benchmark. Okay, obviously if this exact category, jewelry and watches, exists, they'll take it directly, but a lot of the times it won't, so they have to use this estimation method. But the point is they're using the retail sales as the basis for that estimation. That's why retail sales is one of the most important, hardcore output data, right, that is actually produced and that the market likes to look at. Retail sales, right? And you can see it here. I want you to look at this. MRTS. Look how many categories they're using retail sales for. You might be thinking, hang on, MV, so that is GDP, great. It isn't. Okay, the problem is, if you think of the slight problem of thinking that way, if you think of GDP as C plus I plus G plus X minus N, firstly, it's only this, and then it's only a small portion of that. Okay, that's based on retail sales estimates. Okay, this bit of consumption, okay, is based on other things. Okay, and that's where you can see here. I'll show you a lot of the data in consumption doesn't come from retail sales. There's another problem. That retail sales data, it's not like taken directly from retail sales, and that's the whole point of me explaining the extrapolation. Do you see? It's only used as a benchmark. So they obviously do some adjusting and tweaking and messing around, and because a lot of these categories won't exist in retail sales exactly, so they have to do estimates. So there'll be estimation errors, and do you see the point? If you think of the retail sales, it goes through a process of changing and tweaking, and so they can get the exact line in the GDP. So it's not going to be 100% accurate, is my point. This, because they're not actually using the actual retail sales number. They're using a slight, they're tweaking it to fit with the categories they want. So there'll be that problem. Secondly, is this problem that I talked about. It's only forming a small part of consumption expenditures, mainly goods, because retailers sell goods, right? Services, they use slightly different, and I'll show you that. So can you see here, fuel oil and fuels, and also so MRTS, and I'll come back to you about the differences between MRTS and advanced retail sales, which is what you see here. This is not MRTS, it's MARTS. Okay. Yeah, no, this is getting it's getting a bit out of hand, isn't it? But no, it's good. It's real good. It's very, very important you understand all of this. MRTS, and then here, can you see it no longer uses MRTS? Look, services. So you see that was all goods. Remember I said it's mainly goods, MRTS, and it's not everything. Even within goods, you're going to get some things in terms of output that isn't using retail sales. Look, like motor vehicle fuels. Look, they're using the same as for the most recent year. So they're using, where's it gone? EIA, Energy Agency, right? They're using data from a different organization, right? On prices from BLS. Can you see for that, there is no retail sales. So some things, have a look yourself. The majority of it will be retail sales being used as a benchmark that they then use to estimation. But a lot of this, just making sure it's recording, otherwise I will be very upset because I do not want to have to explain all of that again. Hopefully it's the last time I ever have to explain that. But no, look, on a serious note, if you go through, you'll see there's the few items in goods that do not use retail sales, even though the bulk of them do. There will be some that I just showed you there. So there was 1 or 2 items there. The EIA, you see, like motor vehicle fuels, seeing if I can find any others. Net expenditures for abroad, that's done through the international transaction accounts. Okay, now look at services. They do not use retail sales. Look, remember, we're interested in quarterly estimates. What are they using? Unit stocks from some other data from the Census Bureau. For rental, right? I think there is a particular survey they do for housing, rental value. Look at this, judgmental. They're not even using, they're using something else. So they'll have employees that will go out and use judgment based on, I don't know exactly how they do it. Sorry, after all that talking, I need some water, sparkling water. I love sparkling water. Okay, excuse me. So yeah, look at this. Water supply and sanitation, electricity. See, that's not using retail sales. We know services is a huge part of consumption expenditures, even more than goods, right? Over the last couple of decades, services is becoming bigger. Can you see why you can't just rely on retail sales and say, oh yeah, that will be GDP? It won't. Is a decent indication of where the goods part of consumption expenditures will land, which is a decent indication of where the whole of consumption expenditures will land, which is a decent rough guide of where GDP will land. Okay, can you see we're all talking how is trading? Trading is very rough and ready, grey. That's how it's used. I'm just showing you why so many people like to use it, because it's so commonly applied, right? If you go down here, you show me another survey that is applied so commonly through GDP, you won't find it. Okay, there's all different types of surveys used and judgment used, and look, within services, retail sales stops being used. Okay, there is nothing. Look, can you see it? They're all using all sorts of different methodologies here. There's all these different types of surveys. Okay, and if you want, you can go down to the bottom. Okay, keep going down just for the legend. Can you see that? Economic census, and they seem to use this one a lot. Quarterly services survey. You'll see that a lot there. There you go, QSS, and so obviously isn't released like advanced retail sales is every month. So obviously that's not necessarily that useful for us. Retail sales is kind of our best guess that we might have. Payrolls data as well, ISM services, manufacturing. Do you see? That's what traders are trying to do. That is what they are trying to do. Okay, they are trying to come up with where this might land. Instead of going through all this, can you imagine as a trader having to do all of this? What you see in this quarterly estimate, do series indicators, extrapolate. You wouldn't have any time to sleep, let alone trade. Right? So next best thing. I'm telling you all of this because I want you to realize the importance of what I'm showing you here. All roads are leading towards the GDP, right? Towards the end of the quarter, obviously. That is what everyone is doing. They're just trying to estimate. I want to show you how the BEA does them because I want to show you retail sales is used heavily and therefore it's quite important. That is the summary of GDP. That's it. Okay, fantastic. Now you can see how it's, hopefully that was a very useful summary for you. I just want to talk about, you see that MRTS versus MARTS. Okay, so what happens, and maybe I shouldn't have closed those down. So if we go to this, let me show you basically, it's because it is quite important. Part of the reason, okay, so it's this one, revisions and source data. Part of the reason that there is a difference between the there's a reason why they're not using advanced retail sales and they're using this one. There's a difference between them. Okay, so let me see if I can find it. Definitions. Give me a second. Like I said, I don't. That's why you've got such a great section. Because can you imagine me planning any of this? It'd take me months. I just tell it out of my head because then you're getting everything. So hence why I'm saying I don't know exactly where it is. But where is it? About the surveys, monthly retail. Okay, so can you see firstly the monthly retail, so this is retail sales, MRTS, right, which was God, it's not enough pages. I don't know why I closed all those down. Sorry about this. We'll get there. I don't know why I closed this down. The one that they seem to use a lot, which is the MRTS in that table. So here, MRTS, okay, which is retail sales, which is this one, MRTS. Can you see it's not released until 6 weeks after the end of the month? Have you noticed how, and you should know anyway, do you see how this retail sales is released when? 3rd week. Okay, so this is the advanced release. So MRTS, which is normal retail sales, comes 6 weeks late of, let's say it's January, it will come mid-March. Whereas this would come in like the 3rd week of February. And this is MARTS, okay, March. It's advanced retail sales, okay. What it is, they're both the same thing, except this has, it gives them time and they survey more retailers. Whereas this, they only, I think it's 5, and honestly, I don't know how I even remember this. I could be so wrong. I think it's 500 and I think this is like 3,000. And that's why the BEA prefers to use this data. So for this advanced estimate, by the time the advanced GDP comes along, remember, quarter is 3 months, month 1, month 2, month 3. Remember when quarterly GDP comes out? It's like 4 weeks later. You see, you're going to have the MRTS for month 1. You're going to have the MRTS for month 2, 6 weeks later. You're not going to have the MRTS for another couple of weeks later for month 3. So they use 2 of these and then they estimate month 3 based on, I think, the advanced, but they prefer to use full data, obviously, where they have it, i.e. the 3,000 companies, and then the third one. So do you remember we have like advanced GDP and then we have preliminary GDP, like a month later? The preliminary GDP will then take that into account. That's why, and you might be thinking, Envy, what are you on about? Well, that is why, where is it gone? That is why, let's have a look. I'm going to get to the point. Where is it gone? That pie chart changes. Okay, that is why the pie chart changes. And I know a lot of this is a lot to take in. I'm explaining to you things I spent months learning in the space of like a couple of hours. So don't worry if it's a lot. Just rewatch it. I kept saying this at the start, the long speech I gave. This is why. Don't just watch the video and then shoot off and start trading. And yeah, I understand all the stuff now. Brilliant. Let me just use GDP and hey, no. Give it the time it deserves. That's why I gave that whole speech at the start. This. Okay. Let me just delete that. So I'm so relieved once this theory section is over. You see this comprehensive data. Can you see it jumps 10%? Because more retail sales data is available because they are using MRTS. And I'm desperate to find, I lost all my, what I've done with it. Oh, here it is. So you know what, I'm not going to end this until I show you the difference between the MRTS and AIM, the advanced, or I'm obsessed over that. Where's it gone? So, I don't know, I've got so many windows open. It's the retail sales, isn't it? Sorry, it was there, wasn't it? Retail sales. So retail sales, and I've jumped forward 1 month, doesn't matter. So you go to the Census Bureau or latest release or whatever. In fact, let's go to latest release. Okay, so it'll take you straight there. So you see how I went retail sales and it took me in. Can you see the advanced monthly trade retail report, which is, I'm sorry to keep jumping around, but it is, where is it gone there? You see, it's the MARTS and this is the retail. So basically here's the differences. Okay, so if we go to, I'll tell you how to find the differences. Basically go to how the data, I think it's how the data are collected. Okay, so what you do, go to how the data are collected, advanced monthly retail, which is the MARTS, okay, which is the one that we look at on the calendar. Okay, so this one basically, let me just close that down. excuse me, this core retail sales, or whatever number you're used to looking at, that's this one, March. Okay, so what you do is, sorry, let me shut this down as well, keep jumping around. How the data are collected, we're finally there. Okay, so what you do is you click on that, and then you click on advanced monthly retail sales survey methodology. I finally found it. It's all over the place. The March, so the advanced, which is the one we look at, is a sample of approximately 5,500 units. All right. From the total sample of 13,000. Okay, so can you see MRTS? So remember I said 530. It's actually, I got it wrong. It's 5,500. Okay, they're asking 5,500 retailers units in the MARTS. Okay, and they're asking, I think it does say it here, I hope it does. The sampling frame, there you go. Where is it? Sample 13,000 employer firms. Okay, that is the difference between the two of them. Okay, so March is 5,500 and MRTS is 13,000. Okay, so the one that you are looking at, that everyone looks at, is March. This one. Why? Pause it. Have a guess. Okay, now you've come back. Hopefully you've guessed it well, because that is released 3 weeks after month end. Okay, that is March. Advanced retail sales. Okay, based on 5,500 firms. MRTS is released when? I think it's 6 weeks, isn't it? 6 weeks after month end, based on 13,000. Do you see? It just gives them more time to collect data. Okay, this is the one that the BEA are using. For RKO, who cares? It's pretty much the same thing, right? Traders don't really care too much about which one they're using, because they're very, very similar numbers. I just like to be accurate, I don't operate that way, and you shouldn't either, right? Do you see it says MRTS? It's not good enough for me just to tell you, hey, it's retail sales, and no, because it isn't. It's not the advanced retail sales. It's kind of a better version of this that they're using, because think about it, the quarterly data is at the end of 3 months, so they don't have to use month 1 retail sales, advanced retail sales. They can use the MRTS. Okay, hopefully that's really clear. You should go and watch this several times if it isn't, because I feel I have explained it in as clear as I can. Okay, this is MARTS, released after week 3. Okay, so think about it. Quarterly GDP is at week 12 is the whole quarter, plus another 4 weeks to the release, week 16 for advanced GDP. Okay, that is MARTS. That's MRTS, week 6. Do you see? Okay, and then week 12 MRTS for, so this is for January, for example, and then February will be week 12, and week 6 actually week 7, won't it? Because 4 weeks and then, no, it won't. Yeah, 4 weeks and then 3 weeks afterwards you get the release. For MARTS, this will be MRTS. This is MARTS. And then week 12, the end of the quarter, you'll get what? 3 weeks later, week 15, you will get the advanced retail sales. Okay, so they'll use, do you see they'll use 2 MRTSs and 1 advanced for that first release. By the time the second release comes out in week 20, they will then incorporate the third MRTS. And this is considered comprehensive. This is considered not. Okay, so that's why that comprehensive pie chart jumps. All right, this. Okay, that's it. Summary. That was retail sales introduction. We're now gonna talk about retail sales a little bit, just how it's kind of roughly put together. I've kind of done it anyway. Hopefully it won't be that longer section. But this was more like summary of hopefully real comprehensive summary of GDP. If it makes, I want you to, I can't stress that enough. You need to read this, okay? 11 pages of all of this. Okay, you need to read this, okay? Personal consumption expenditures, okay? You can have a look at some of the source data, it's quite useful, 3 and 4, if you want. I think it's very, very useful. It's not compulsory for you to do that, You need to go through the tables, okay? Once you do all those things, you'll have a very, very good understanding of GDP and how retail sales feeds into it. The reason I've done this, hopefully you can see now why. Retail sales, I keep saying it, makes up such a big portion as a consistent, you know, because with a lot of the other stuff, they're using all sorts of surveys from here and there. It's very confusing and there's no consistency in terms of, you saw with the goods section of consumption, they're consistently using retail sales again and again and again. With some of the other areas, they're using so many different surveys, it becomes quite difficult. And some of those surveys aren't released until, you know, after couple of months, 3 months, whatever it is. Retail sales is consistently released, albeit I did add a confusion there. Told you it isn't actually that retail sales. That's advanced retail sales. They're using the slightly more comprehensive retail sales of however many firms it was, 13,000 instead of 5,500. But that's a little nuance. It doesn't matter. But that is why retail sales is so important. What we're now going to do, I'm going to cut the video there. If it didn't make sense, go and watch it 5 times, 10 times, whatever you have to do, not in one day. Obviously, take some time, a couple of months, come back, and I'm going to explain just very briefly retail sales and the data, even though I think I've done majority of it here already. And then that will be the end of all the theory, and then we'll be heading towards the end of the course, basically. But we'll talk a lot about that afterwards. So I'll see you on the other side for retail sales. Have a great day.